Hi, my name is Yanet Medina, and for my presentation, I will be talking about sexual education in the United States. In today's society, there's a disconnect in the way we teach children about their changing bodies and relationships that stem from that. But therein lies the problem. Who is responsible for teaching children about the ever-evolving sexuality, and how do we find the solution without offending the other? The solution can begin by talking to the opposing side, figuring out what works and what does not, and come to a solution together. And whatever those tools may be, we can both agree that what we want is for children to lead happy, healthy lives, and that starts with making informed decisions when it comes to their sexuality. Which is why I'll be talking about comprehensive sexual education versus an abstinence-only education that they only receive once, maybe twice throughout their lives. Why are we even arguing about the subject of sexual education? You may ask. It worked for me, or did it? Maybe you're just a statistic, but because it has been proven through studies that abstinence-only marriage programs do not work as effectively as comprehensive sexual education, they need an update. These abstinence programs are so popular because during the 1960s and 1970s, according to Chana Kornblatt, a reporter for Newsweek, she states in her article that throughout the revolution of love, sex education became a political issue, and Christian conservative groups and organizations promoting sexual education clashed in their beliefs. She also states that during the 80s and 90s, with the AIDS and HIV epidemics, sex education then became a necessity, and religious conservative groups lobbied for abstinence-only education, and they won. So from an evolutionary standpoint of ideas, we have failed to implement many sides and simply adopt abstinence only. So, it's 2017, not 1980. An update is needed. The chart that I have here was produced by Hall et al., in which they retrieved data from 48 states that revealed the level of abstinence education was positively correlated with both teen pregnancy and teen birth, indicating that abstinence education in the U.S. does not cause abstinence behavior. So to the contrary, teens in states that have a more abstinence-only education are more likely to become pregnant. There are some common beliefs and concerns about how sexual education should be discussed and implemented. And one of the main concerns is who has the responsibility to teach children about sex. On one hand, there's a common belief that parents have a responsibility to teach about the birds and the bees, but what about those parents who do not? If not parents, do schools have a moral obligation to educate children in sexual education? Whatever your belief, there should be a consensus that schools should be implementing some sort of sexual education, since students spend most of their formative years in them. This leads to the next concern about what children will be taught. Currently, there is no national standard curriculum which schools are required to teach. The curriculums that are in place vary from state to state and are not mandatory. The NCSL, an organization that reports on the state policies on sex education in public schools, reveal that at the state level, individual states, districts, and school boards determine implementation of federal policies and funds. This means that this leaves room for states to implement their own agenda and ideologies that do not have to support medically accurate terminology or state-of-the-art curriculums. And as we learned earlier, Hall et al. State that the majority of funding goes towards promoting programs that are abstinent only until marriage. And data collected from the inception of these programs provide proof that these programs do not work. They maintain that the research shows the lack of efficacy of abstinence only until marriage programs in delaying sexual initiation, reducing sexual risky behaviors or improving reproductive health outcomes, and the effectiveness of comprehensive sexual education in increasing condom and contraceptive use and decreasing pregnancy rates and keeping them healthy, and the effectiveness of it all. Regardless of what should be taught or not taught, there should be a consensus that sexual education should be standardized so that it works. It should also be medically accurate, honest, transparent, but also at the discretion of parents. In addition to the statements above, many parents share that children will learn about sexual topics before they are ready to. For many parents, the idea that children will learn about sex is even more terrifying. According to Miriam Watley and Bonnie Trudell, adults may find it difficult to disregard the ideal of childhood innocence, which encourages them to keep children uncontaminated by sexual knowledge, which is a completely natural thing. Parents want to protect their children, but they also need to realize that they are an obstacle in helping children make the transition to non-exploitative adult sexuality. Parents need to disregard the idea that their children will be innocent forever and instead help children to know where to draw the line, specifically when dealing with sexual abuse or toxic relationships. Many of the common beliefs and arguments can be validated or invalidated with the discussion. There are many reasons why people plainly oppose to having comprehensive sexual education taught in schools and stick to only abstinence programs. There is an argument to be made that when dealing with such sensitive information, parents should be the ones to expose them to such information. Parents have the responsibility to instill their own values that have been passed down through generations. In a study conducted by Kristen Haglund and Richard Faring, they examined how structure had a positive impact on teens, and subsequently they were less likely to engage in sex and have significantly less sex partners than their peers. The study also illustrates how parents can exert a protective and positive influence in a variety of ways, which include maintaining that two-parent household and educating their children on topics of sex. This is extremely important because parents really can be the biggest positive influence in children's lives. After all, the parents are the ones that will see them through their heartbreaks, first love, or sexual encounter. Religion is also a main concern when discussing sexual education in the classroom. This ultimately begins the theological conversation of what exactly it means to be sexual. There is an idea in many cultures that a person is to remain abstinent throughout youth so that they can be clean and faithful for marriage. This belief is practiced and should be observed for those who believe, but one also has to respect that not everyone has this belief. Finally, another strength of the other side is how these programs would be funded and implemented. Currently, as of 2016, Congress has continued to solely fund abstinence-only programs with a budget of $85 million per year. Any sort of deviation from these programs lead to their own sort of issues and therefore more money spent. One of the main funding concerns is having competent and knowledgeable teachers and educators on the subject. Watley and Trudell, specialists in sexual education and women's studies, state that teachers often have to squeeze sexuality in among a variety of health issues, and time constraints limit possibilities for in-depth coverage and discussion, and they do not always have the proper certification to deal with such complex and controversial issues. These are tremendous costs to consider when so much is asked of our educators. In addition, students should be getting medically accurate information from someone who knows how to do it. Ultimately, however, there is no cost to consider the valuable information that children could be getting. While the beliefs and arguments for keeping abstinence-only sexual education has its strengths, so do the advocates for a well-rounded, comprehensive sexual education. It should start as young as kindergarten because it is just as important as regular education. With so many factors and issues that parents have about comprehensive sexual education, we can start by agreeing that the system is broken. The goal is not just to reduce sexually transmitted diseases, premarital sex, or unplanned pregnancies, but to provide children with an arsenal of tools they can carry into adulthood. The recommendations from professionals like Watley and Trudell stress that sex education should be integrated into a comprehensive, coordinated K-12 sexuality curriculum, and concepts should be repeated and reinforced rather than presented as a one-shot disconnected lesson. With advancements in technology and the amount of research that has been done against abstinence-only education, why are we still advocating for it? And the majority of the reason is because of negative parental reactions, because administrators want to avoid controversial topics. But that just is a flat-out ignorant way of dealing with something that is going to happen anyway. We should be equipping children with the tools necessary to live responsible lives. This is not to say that sexual education programs should have kindergartners learning about contraception, but to engage them in a different dialogue, engage them in positive conversations about relationships, and build upon that. Children are owed that right to receive honest and trustworthy information. In Milton Levine's article, Early Sex Education, he analyzes how sex education begins long before the child reaches school age, and how there are different ways of teaching children the truth about sex. By being honest to a child, the child will then feel free to ask further questions of the adult rather than seek information elsewhere. Advocating for an alternative to abstinence-only education starts with looking at the data ahead and going from there. We can begin by shifting the rhetoric and advocating for a more comprehensive sex education. There are so many mixed messages that a child receives, and even more subtle, nuanced cues that end up forming many of their ideals. Children are so impressionable, and if one is advocating to expose them to their sexuality and to those around them, it is also important to expose them to things that are dangerous. And sex is a natural thing. It should not be viewed as dangerous or shameful. Watley and Trudell assert that when the main goal of prevention utilizes fear, like in abstinence-only programs, they run the risk that this will be the child's first exposure to sexuality issues, and that association with something dangerous and scary may facilitate easier acceptance of a link between violence and sexuality later. Ultimately, with all the research that I have done, I concluded that my side is better. Giving children a comprehensive sexual education throughout K-12 is more than just learning about sex. It is about receiving training in mutual love, LGBTQ plus issues, sexual abuse, safe sex, and contraception protection for both sexes, which is something that abstinence-only programs not only don't provide, but has been proven doesn't work. So with the basic understanding of where we are today with sexual education, we can continue to move forward with ideas and programs that involve more comprehensive issues. This is why I'm an advocate for early comprehensive sexual education in the United States. So what can we do as a compromise or a possible solution? I think the first step to reach common ground, besides shifting the paradigm of what sexual education is outreach, and it's needed so everyone has a voice in the process. There currently is a model of this shift in Oregon, which is an example that is encouraged by Oregon for other states to follow. While we have come to know and support an abstinence-only until marriage sexual education model in the United States for decades, it is now time to update, revise, and release a new initiative. We should be implementing comprehensive sexual education in all schools, and it should be well-rounded, continuous through K-12, and medically accurate. Sexual education is more than the anatomical models of genitals or trying to prevent pregnancy. It should be able to equip the youth with the tools necessary to live a loving, respectful, and mindful life. Thank you.